So, what is my first video of 2020 gonna be? It's gonna be my favourite books of 2019. That's the video. Subscribe. This is hopefully going to be a tag video of some kind. But if you're interested, I will list all the questions in the description and then you can do your own version of it. How many books did I read in 2019? In total, I read 62 books. I originally wanted to do 52 and then overtook it by 10 books, which I am pretty happy with, to be honest. Never thought I would actually go over 53, which was my goal before, so. What were my top 5 books of the year and why? Motherhood by Sheila Heti. This is a poetic non-fiction book about her thoughts on motherhood and how she doesn't really want to become a mother. Over the course of several years, under the influence of her partner, body, family, friends, mysticism and chance, she struggles to make a moral and meaningful choice. So using I Ching, which I believe is like a Chinese chant system, which I didn't actually know about till I read this, she tries to have dialogues with herself over whether she wants to be a mother and what that entails. It's so wonderfully, beautifully written. This is exactly the kind of book I like, where it's kind of non-fiction, but it's also kind of mystical. I've been having lots of thoughts about this book since, about whether I want to be a mother. It's a fascinating book and it's also easily one of my favourites, maybe of all time. So my second favourite of my top 5 is White Chrysanthemum by Marilyn Bracht, a young girl from Korea who is then taken by Japanese soldiers and she becomes a comfort woman. The story is so harrowing and there are 2 separate sections, one of them set in Korea slash Manchuria, where she ends up going kidnapped by the Japanese army, and the other half is another character who I won't spoil for you, but she is in kind of the modern period and she's very interested in like comfort women. The book also kind of hinges on a narrative device of the henyo. I said that really badly. The women dive for like food to sell, so they're the matriarchs, they're like the female breadwinners if you will, and they do deep diving without any equipment and it's so interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of metaphors you can get out of the whole diving part of it. This was so harrowing, particularly near the end. It's written stunningly. I highly recommend this, although it's not exactly, you know, like your happy read or anything. Wouldn't pick this up if you're in a happy read mood, which, you know, some people maybe. I don't currently have the next book because my best friend Georgia is reading it, and it's actually a reread in 2019 because I read this many years ago, but upon rereading I realised how much I frigging love this book. It's How to Build a Girl by Moran. This is a fiction novel, although to be fair it's very similar to her life, so I think it's like very thinly autobiographical, although she claims it's not, so I don't want to make assumptions. This is an extremely funny book about a girl from Wolverhampton and a council estate who, through the course of her adolescence and then into her young adulthood, becomes a music journalist in London. I have realised I love any kind of book which is like a coming of age book in London. I don't know why that's a thing, but that's what my heart desires as a book. It's all about her like forays into like sexual experiences and like friends and drugs, and it's just very interesting. Maybe that's because I haven't lived that kind of life. Not to sound morally superior. I'm not saying that's better or worse, I'm just saying maybe that's why I like reading these kind of books, because they're very different experiences to what I've had. The way Moran writes, I can't even put my finger on it, but it's pretty much how I feel. I think it's because I have ADHD. The way she writes is so adjacent, so everything kind of flows in like one kind of stream of consciousness, but it all kind of makes sense at the same time. This is a funny, great book, and I highly recommend it. I also love Catelyn in general. She's just so enthusiastic and optimistic. I think that's why I like her style, her writing style. My 4th favourite book of 2019 was Educated. This is a tale of a girl who grew up in a, I don't want to say like a cult because it wasn't. Her dad was a very overbearing figure. It's a real story, it's an autobiography of her childhood, adolescence, etc. in this American, very isolated community, doesn't have a whole lot of access to kind of modern amenities and things like that. Super interesting. The reason it's called Educated is because she basically educates herself and somehow gets to like these really amazing Ivy League, I think that's what they're called, universities. I did give this book to my best friend Georgia and she couldn't get along with it, so I think it's a very Marmite book, it's very 50-50. So yeah, I highly recommend this if you're interested in cults, education, self-sufficient women, etc. Now the last book, easily again one of my all-time favourites I think, not just for 2019, is a book called Clothes, Music, Boys. My mum lended me this book from one of her friends, and so now I've had to give it back, which is such a shame because it's so amazing that I might actually buy it again and reread it. That's how much I enjoyed it. This is Viv Albertine's autobiography, and it's about her time forming the band The Slits, which is an iconic female punk band in, I want to say, the 80s. This was honestly incredible. It again gave me vibes of like coming of age in adolescence in London. It's all about the punk ethos and like how bands were made, and it made me fascinated in the Slits. Very similar to like the How to Build a Girl book in some ways. It just combined everything that I like punk music, feminism, autobiography, women in music, everything. It just combined it and I loved it so much. I've thought about it pretty much every day since I finished it, which is you know, pretty telling. So question number 3, I've written most read author of the year. I did reread some Jacqueline Wilson books this year, so that probably is actually the most author I have read. But I have also read a few books by David Sedaris this year. It's definitely one of those voices that I had to get used to before I really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed the Santaland Diaries the most. Calypso is still really funny though. I just think about his stories all the time. I think they're so funny and witty. Oh, and I don't want to leave her out because she's awesome. But I've also read quite a few books this year. I think all of her books maybe. Bryony Gordon. Her book Mad Girl is my favourite, and it's about her mental health and how she overcame or tried to overcome these really debilitating OCD obsessions and addictions. And she also wrote a book about running, which I think is how I got into her because I read the running book first. Relatable, very funny. She has a great Instagram which is very body positive, and yeah, I highly recommend Bryony Gordon's books as well. Which books were sort of disappointing? I only had 2 books that I've written down that I could remember that I found were disappointing. So the manga is My Hero Academia. I'd heard so much about the anime, so I was like, I'm gonna read the manga first because I was like, why not? And it's just not great. It's a bit boring, the story is just blah, the characters are one-dimensional, the art style's really disorienting in the manga. Like I couldn't really tell what was going on a lot of the time, which is not what you want in a book. You want to know what's going on. So yeah, I didn't enjoy that. Normal People by Sally Rooney. This famous book? It's not famous, but like it was much hyped. This is a story of a romance. I think it's even in Barack Obama's like recommended books of like 2019. Brack, what you doing? This was a love story of 2 people who basically couldn't decide, and it was so frustrating. Please, make your minds up. Are you together? Are you not together? What are you doing? It was just that for like 300 pages, and like usually that might be a bit gripping, but it just wasn't. I didn't find myself endeared to any of the characters, and it was just boring, so I'm sorry. Question number 5 was there a theme or recurring subject in the books you read this year? I mean, I pretty much already said it, but books that were set in London or living in London, coming of age books. I read quite a few books about mythology in 2019. Quite a few meaning like 2, but you know that's more than 1, so. Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, which is his retelling of the ancient Norse myths. That was fantastic. The 2 books by Stephen Fry, Heroes and the other one, Mythos, about Greek myths and Greek heroes. They were fascinating. I need to expand my vocabulary. I've always known that I loved religious stories and tales like that, so yeah, this pretty much solidified my interest in it. Question number 6, what genres am I aiming to try in 2020? Autobiographies. Apparently that's my favourite genre. I'd also like to try and read more graphic novels. I feel like I'm missing out on a whole genre, and I have enjoyed many graphic novels in the past. Often, again, autobiographical ones like Persepolis, like Fun Home. So that's one genre I want to try, and then another genre is, or are, novels by LGBTQ+ folks and trans authors. I've been reading Juno Dawson's books. I just find her voice so wonderful, down to earth and blunt. She just tells it like it is. So I really want to read more books about gender because I find gender fascinating. Oh, I also read Jonathan Van Ness's autobiography, and that was great. I think it's called Over the Top. And lastly, question number 7, I think. Have I made reading plans for 2020, and what are they? Yes, my reading plans, as I already outlined in my resolutions video, is I want to read 75 books because, you know, I read 62. I think I can read 75. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year. I feel very positive about 2020. I feel like we're all gonna do well. We're all gonna do fine. I will see you probably next week or the week after. I'm trying to be more consistent. Thanks for watching and have a great life. That was a terrible ending. I'm sorry.